the Dorsal Column-Medial Lemniscus Pathway, DCML. So, the dorsal column-medial lemniscus pathway is part of the ascending tracts of the spinal cord. It mainly relays sensations of fine and discriminative touch, pressure, stretch, and vibration, and the most important of all is the proprioception sensation. So now let's track the dorsal column-medial lemniscus pathway. External stimuli of fine discriminative touch, pressure, stretch, and vibrations, and proprioception trigger their receptors, triggering the generation of nerve impulses in the pseudo-unipolar first-order neurons. Note, by the way, this tract has very fast nerve fibers. Before we continue, let's divide the spinal cord into two sections. That is the spinal cord above T6 and those below the T6. First-order neurons, the pseudo-unipolar neurons from the regions below T6, enter the spinal cord through the posterior grey horn and travel towards the dorsal white column ipsilaterally without crossing or synapsing. It then ascends more medially to this dorsal median sulcus as the fasciculus gracilis within the dorsal column. Axon fibers of the fasciculus gracilis ascend the rest of the spinal cord ipsilaterally. The axon fibers of the first-order neurons of fasciculus gracilis synapse with those of the second-order neurons in the nucleus gracilis within the medulla ipsilaterally. For the first-order neurons, the pseudo-unipolar neurons from the regions above the T6 enter the spinal cord through the posterior grey horn and project in towards the dorsal white column ipsilaterally without crossing or synapsing. It then ascends more lateral to the dorsal median sulcus and the fasciculus gracilis, and ascends as the fasciculus cuneatus within the dorsal column. Axon fibers of the fasciculus cuneatus ascends the rest of the spinal cord ipsilaterally. The axon fibers of the first-order neurons of fasciculus cuneatus synapse with those of the second-order neurons in the nucleus cuneatus within the medulla ipsilaterally. Second-order neurons of ipsilateral fasciculus cuneatus and fasciculus gracilis form connections, bundle up, and cross contralaterally in the dorsal part of the medulla in an area called the internal actuate fibers. This newly formed bundle, from the connections of fasciculus cuneatus and fasciculus gracilis, is called the medial lemniscus. The medial lemniscus ascends through the brainstem and into the thalamus, where it synapses with the third-order neurons at the ventral posterior lateral nucleus. The axons of the third-order neurons pass through the posterior one-third of the internal capsule and then come up through the coronal radiata into the primary somatosensory cortex, where the somatosensory sensations are interpreted.